Hello, hello, and a very good morning, everyone. Welcome to Epsilon 2026. I am Abham, PR and Admin Head at IEEE SISGST.
And I am Aditi, Publicity Head at IEEE SIGST. We are delighted to be your host for the fifth iteration of our flagship event, Epsilon 2026, where our goal is to provide an organized learning environment and share valuable technical insights under the theme Dimensions of Discovery.
Welcome, everyone. We believe that today's session, titled Inside Modern Cyber Attacks How Systems Are Compromised Today, will offer you valuable insights into how modern cyber threats actually join unfold. Through real world attacks, scenarios, and practical examples, you will understand how vulnerabilities are exploited and how thinking like an attacker can strengthen your defensive approach. This session will help you bridge the gap between theory and real world cybersecurity practices.
Now, let us begin our much awaited session by welcoming our esteemed guest speaker for the day.
For today's session, we have with us Mr. Edward Starkey. Edward Starkey is a recognized cybersecurity leader and trusted board advisor, known for his business centric approach to cybersecurity, data protection, and digital operational resilience. As a senior vice president at Kroll, he pioneered cybersecurity M&A services across EMEA and has served as a virtual CISO for global organizations, advising boards and technical teams on practical and effective cyber risk management. He regularly speaks at industry events, collaborates with law enforcement on incident responsive initiatives, and is frequently quoted in national publications. He holds a master's degree in international law and is a member of Chartered Institute of Information Security (MCIIS).
Welcome, sir. We are truly honored to you have with us today and are looking forward to an insightful and engaging session.
We now invite our speaker to kick off today's webinar, Inside Modern Cyber Attacks, How Systems Are Compromised Today. Get ready to uncover real attack chains, understand how modern breaches unfold, and learn how thinking like an attacker can strengthen your defensive strategies.
Wonderful. Thank you ever so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to contribute to what is a fantastic initiative. As we'll go on to it a little bit later on, but from my own perspective, getting involved in these kind of activities, contributing to initiatives like this is so important. So yeah, being able to contribute from the other side as a guest speaker is I'm really honoured. So thank you ever so much. Wonderful. So hopefully you can see my slides. If not, we can just wait for those to pop up. Perfect. So how systems are compromised. It's a fairly big topic, and what I hope to do today is give an overview of I guess some of the key areas of technical compromise that occur within organizations. And yeah, we've got time at the end for discussions and questions, but please pop them in the chat as we go along. I'm more than happy to try and pick those up so I can see the YouTube comments as they come through. So what we cover, yeah, we'll kind of introductions, make sure everybody knows who everybody is, some of the threats and the attack vectors, ransomware, because it's just so important, and kind of giving a little bit of an insight into how threat actors behave. So what I've tried to do in this session is kind of peel back the curtain a little bit and show you kind of what happens on the other side. So I'm a massive fan of, if you can understand how threat actors think and behave, you can put in place appropriate controls and mechanisms to protect yourselves against them. So we'll do a little bit of that. Of course, there has to be a little bit about kind of AI. Can't have a presentation without AI, I'm afraid. And moving on to some cloud stuff, and then look at some defense principles, and then we'll have the case study and the general kind of career advice. So hopefully that meets with everybody's approval, and what we'll do is we will trot on. So introductions. Yeah, as you can see, that's me. I am a cybersecurity consultant. I located or based in the UK, just outside of London. I work with organisations across the globe. I haven't always been in cybersecurity. I started my career, well, initially I studied law, then did that master's in international law and went into kind of technology. I didn't realize cybersecurity was a career that you could have. I did a lot of data protection as a result of having the legal background, but have kind of gradually become more and more technical. And I think it's one of these areas where the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. So that's one of the key areas of advice that or the key recommendations that we make at the end, really. You can never know everything, but it's worth trying to know as much as you can. Cool. So the organisation I work for is one called Thomas Murray. We provide services to financial services institutions mostly. So lots and lots of banking clients, pension clients, investment funds, sovereign wealth, basically anybody who's anybody in kind of finance is a client of Thomas Murray in some way, shape or form. And there's kind of just a list of some of them. So yeah, the stock exchanges, asset managers, and then the other institutions as well. It's a really, really kind of interesting kind of mixed bag. Wonderful. So scale of the problem. So you've probably seen slides like this before, but I think it's really worth just kind of starting with this to give a overview of the scale, really. So one of the things about kind of cybersecurity attacks, and we always want to kind of learn from what's there, so threat intelligence is absolutely critical, is looking at patterns and trying to predict kind of what could happen, looking at the latest trends and trying to analyze. So what we've got here is just an example of that kind of analysis that is massively valuable. So the graph here shows the attacks that have taken place against different industry sectors. So right at the bottom, you've got public administration, so massively popular, and this is global attacks as well. So public administration, finance a second, and then retail. And you can see that there are less kind of targeted industries or less successful attacks on industries, kind of as you kind of head further up the page there. If you're talking about kind of successful attacks, you've got the 277 days where the time it takes to identify a breach, big numbers in respects to the average cost, and then yeah, the cyber attacks per day in kind of 2024. So the numbers on the right hand side come from IBM. The graph itself comes from Thomas Murray. We have our own kind of threat intelligence team. It's worth bearing in mind that this graph captures attacks across the spectrum. So we talk about ransomware later on. It captures that. It also captures DOS or DDoS. They're very common and frequently used to target kind of public administration. So there's a lesson there, I guess, for everybody. Make sure you're understanding not only what the graph is trying to show you, but also what data is used within the graph. So a little bit more about the context. Yes, you have those kind of incidents that take place, and then you have some of the kind of the headline attacks, the headline episodes. So the 1.9 billion was associated with the car on the right hand side. If anybody knows what the car on the right hand side is, feel free to whack it into the comments. But basically, Jaguar Land Rover. So Jaguar Land Rover were struck back end of last year, and it crippled the organisation. Manufacturing was halted in the UK. We don't have a huge amount of manufacturing kind of organisations, definitely not on that scale. So when this organisation was hit, massive impact, not only to the organisation itself, but then the organizations that were supporting it. So the kind of downward supply chain. Typically, you hear about supply chain kind of attacks or supply chains being impacted from the other way. So organizations unable to get goods, but from this perspective, it was organizations with no demand because of kind of JLR being impacted. The car on the right hand side is an E-type Jag. Very, very pretty in my opinion. But anyway, by the by. So key trends, as we said, threat intelligence and trying to learn what's going on. So we see kind of increasing kind of attacks, and these are some of the reasons why, really. The cyber crime as a service, fascinating when you start looking at the threat actors and kind of how they operate. And we've got a little bit about that later on. Attack surface growth, probably, preaching to the converted really, but more and more stuff is online, more and more stuff is kind of unmanaged, constant challenges for businesses and individuals to make sure that everything is where it should be, and patched and managed in the appropriate way. Geopolitics can't be overlooked. Massively, massively important. So the events that impact the real world, as it were, will impact cyberspace. So 3 to 5 days is our kind of current estimate from a certain cyber threat group, targeting organizations associated with a particular political allegiance. When there's an event in the news that doesn't align to this political allegiance, there is a series of attacks that occur. One of the things that we do see on an ongoing basis, and on the right hand side there's just an example, is greater collaboration across organizations at a national level and international level. So the report on the right hand side is a combined kind of threat intelligence report that is co-authored by a huge number of Western intelligence organizations, showing the collaboration that takes place at an international level. So yeah, information sharing, threat intel sharing, absolutely fundamental, key to the success of both organizations and states. Cool. So let's get into the meat of the presentation. Initial primary access methods. So how are individuals actually accessing systems? How are they compromising systems? Well, these are the main ways of doing it. So phishing and social engineering continues to be the most popular way of compromising systems. Why? It's easy. Like, let's not get around that fact. Somebody said to me once that you pay individuals to read their emails and then you tell them off for opening and responding to emails. If there's a threat actor that is trying to kind of compromise your system, that is the way that a lot of them will try and get in. It's the door into your environment, really. Public facing apps, there are stuff that you have to have available to the public. Anything that is accessible is a target. So VPNs, firewalls, some web apps, all that kind of good stuff could be a target, and frequently is. So stuff like Citrix Bleed. You constantly see stuff around Fortinet. All that good stuff. Supply chain. We've seen an uptick in an understanding of kind of the importance of supply chain and making sure that there is visibility both up and down supply chains. Lots of outsourcing takes place, lots of offshoring. As kind of technology becomes more and more complex, you need to basically buy in capabilities, buy in that knowledge rather than maintaining it yourself as an organization. So organizations will have third parties that will have access to your environment, and that could be third parties providing the technical solutions, or it could be a platform or a piece of software. So good example of something in this space, SolarWinds back in 2020, massive, absolutely massive. You compromise one, you compromise many. Credential-based stuff, password spraying, MFA, credential leaks, all of these bits that we'll go into in a little bit more detail later on. And then the most fancy thing that people tend to think about is zero-day exploitation on the right-hand side there. Yes, it is used. Challenges, you don't really know how often it's used. You know, there's a reason it's there's a reason that these 0 days are worth so much, and there is a market out there for 0 days. So you tend to see a flurry of 0 days over within a short period of time. So the numbers that I've got on the value of a 0 day, for example, anywhere from $500,000 to 2.5 million USD. So yeah, there's a market out there, people trade in these. I don't know if everybody followed the QR code on the right hand side there, but it's more just an example of why phishing remains the most common attack vector, because it's easy, and that bit.ly link takes you somewhere else. But what I've tried to do is show you that kind of social engineering, if anybody did follow it, is quite easy to do. You have an individual, you provide a way of interacting with information in a slightly different way, and all of a sudden you've fallen victim to a phishing or social engineering attack. So, as I said, that link is perfectly safe, but yeah, I'm just fascinated to hear if anybody actually followed that link. Cool. Okay, we're going into the detail now. So we will. Anybody has any questions, please feel free to pop them into the chat. As you said, adversary in the middle and kind of looking at the phishing attack chain. So there are different ways of actually conducting kind of phishing attacks. They all kind of fall into the kind of the phishing bucket, but essentially there are tools and mechanisms out there that allow you to do this. The adversary kind of in the middle is allowing individuals to break MFA, which was seen as the golden bullet a while back. It was fantastic when it was introduced. It made everything kind of a lot more kind of difficult to do, but then there are kind of ways around it, and the picture on the right hand side there is one of the tools that allows you to kind of get around it. So that's Evil Jinx 2, and this is a commercially available tool. There is an open source version as well. So yeah, most of the attacks that take place use kind of open source tools that have been developed by cybersecurity researchers, and have a way of providing testing capability to individuals. So let's actually have a look at this. You've got the lure. You get an email with a link. You're using kind of typo squatting. So that's a domain that looks very, very similar to one that you would trust. You've got a proxy in the middle. You see the genuine Microsoft or Google login. You enter your username and password. You then that credential is then captured and pushed onto the threat actor, and then you've got the MFA that's been kind of intercepted. So it's all about capturing that session token, making sure that cookie is kind of extracted. Basically, once you've got that, it's all good. You've got full account access. So that's one of the ways in which kind of phishing has, I guess, developed and become more complex. As we said, tools are out there to help you do this. Once you've got in, you're then looking at potentially leveraging some of these techniques. So business email compromise, you hear about this a lot. This is a way in which individuals typically commit kind of fraud within organizations. So payment fraud is a really good example of this, but also just a way of kind of spreading additional, it can be used as a launching point into other organizations as well. So email thread hijacking, you've got, you compromise one account, you reply with a legitimate address, it all comes back to that trust piece, and then you can provide malicious attachments to those individuals, and all of a sudden you've got a web of infected devices, and you have access to multiple entities or organizations. You've got your you can register your lookalike domains. So you hear a lot about domain squatting. and making sure that organizations have visibility and control over domains that are kind of similar. Lots of this is a headache for organizations, but essentially there are controls that you can put in place. So the SPF, DKIM, and DMARC are all ways to make sure that kind of authentication checks are taking place, and kind of spam email is being kind of blocked. The inbox rule manipulation. This, I think, is a really good example of how existing tools and capabilities within your standard tech stack are used by threat actors. And I think this is a really good example where, as you're starting to learn more about how threat actors behave and how they think, and they use what's available to them. So one of the things that we frequently do if there's an incident is go and see if the inbox rules have been changed. So auto forwarding is one of the first things that a threat actor will do once they actually get into an inbox. It becomes easy then, right? You can sit there in the background, emails come in, they then get pushed to you. It's not necessarily very visible for organizations or individuals that are having this. You might get the occasional out of office that pops up. But yeah, it's a really, really kind of common way of doing this. Yeah, and then you've got the other bits around kind of just monitoring for invoices, as we said. The fraud, you then kind of edit the details, kind of sit in the middle. Dear Mr. Smith, just updating my wire details. Hope everything's okay. Did you enjoy the cricket at the weekend? I know you support X, Y, and Z. So yeah, these threat actors will kind of maintain their own visibility and understanding of the threat of the individuals within the email chains, and make emails look as genuine as possible, often by including stuff that has been previously discussed within email conversations. So yes, very, very clever. Common phishing frameworks at the bottom there. As I said, most of this is kind of open source. As with anything that is out there, really, really good to use for educational purposes. Yeah, everything else at your own risk, as it were. Right. Web apps. So SQL injection, the common, it's been around for a long time, right? But this is where you kind of inject a query. It's basically a lack of sanitization and kind of defining the parameters correctly. It still happens. You still get it quite a lot. If you think about all the apps that run with a massive database in the back end, I don't think you can think of, I definitely can't think of any that operate without a back end database of some form. And this is basically a way of extracting data that the user shouldn't be seeing. The next one down, the server-side request forgery. As it says there, you trick the servers into requesting internal kind of resources. Next one, yeah, deserialization attacks, path traversal, buffer overflow. You've got some really kind of good examples there. So the Citrix bleed. Yeah, you've got the session tokens and the kind of the buffer overflow, which you see again and again. All of these are things that if you're having a pen test conducted, you would expect to test. These are all kind of known attack vectors or known attack types. But yeah, constantly appearing in the wild, as it were. Very, very worth becoming kind of familiar with these as an area of attack. Infrastructure and networks. So yeah, we mentioned earlier, VPN, the firewalls, all of that kind of good stuff. They're there. They're available to the outside world a lot of the time. They're the edge devices, as it says, and they have high value. So VPNs constantly being attacked, firewalls constantly being attacked. It's a headache for organizations to make sure that these are patched and maintained. One thing that is, I guess, a little bit more interesting potentially is the Active Directory attacks. AD, critical to a lot of organizations, most organizations. There are individuals that spend their entire lives working within Active Directory, understanding how the individual protocols work, how the authentication and the tickets and the approvals and the creds are handled, and there are ways around the existing kind of operations within Active Directory. So yeah, Kerberos roasting is a really good example of that, but there are others, and we talk about them kind of in a little bit as well. And then you've got the container stuff as well at the bottom. So yes, as new technology is introduced, so are kind of new attacks. It's worth saying that this is a little bit of a hint at some of the stuff later on. There are individuals within the offensive space, and by offensive I mean kind of red teaming, ethical hacking, that will specialize in these areas. So Active Directory, you have the Active Directory experts. So you have the infrastructure networks, infrastructure network kind of specialists, or the web app specialists, or the mobile app specialists. You don't need to necessarily be a fantastic expert at all of these in order to be really, really successful kind of in the field of cybersecurity. Wonderful. Credential and access attacks, info stealer malware, Trojans that harvest your data, your passwords, your login details in certain circumstances. Tokens as well, and your session cookies. You see a load of these. These are really kind of picking up. Why do these exist? Because yeah, people will kind of reuse passwords, or not have MFA in place, or once MFA is in place, you've got a session cookie. You're good. You're good to kind of run it against the account in that particular session. So it's an area that has seen an absolute explosion, and Vidal we'll look at in a second. Is a really kind of common info stealer that we're seeing a lot of. Very, very easy to spread, really. So whether it's the kind of the cracked software, the SEO poisoning, yeah, very, very, very common. Credential stuffing, automated testing, and I think that's one of the things that we'll talk about in a bit with AI. But just the technology that is available now allows you to conduct attacks at scale and be able to do a lot of offensive activities very, very easily. Yes, there are things that you can put in place, auto lockouts, all that kind of good stuff, but a lot of these controls aren't necessarily included. So yes, there are credential stuffing attacks that take place. Also, if you're doing credential stuffing attacks, it tends to be quite noisy as well. So that's one of the things that is kind of frequently picked up. Pass the hash and pass the ticket. Mimikatz, again, an attack against kind of Active Directory. I don't know if you get a chance, have a look. If you're running Mimikatz on a device that has any kind of monitoring on it, it will set alarms off. It's just very, 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 very well known, and is a tool that is very, very widely used as part of a test. Yeah, and it's how you essentially, it was one of the ways that you can essentially achieve, yeah, kind of, I guess, increase your access levels within a system. Wonderful. Okay. MFA fatigue as well. That's also kind of worth mentioning. Huge amounts of just hammering individuals for approvals from an MFA perspective. So what we've got here is a view that just gives you an indication as to how. And I know it's not the best picture, but what I'll do, this is from a source called Joe's Sandbox, and this is really one of the first sources I'm going to kind of recommend as an area for you guys to go and have a look at. What it does is it captures and presents the way that particular piece of malware or malware kind of behaves, and you can look at the reports that are generated. It will look at the different kind of processes that are kind of triggered. Look at whether it's calling out and all this kind of stuff. So, yeah, if you're a learner that operates in a visual manner, Joe's Sandbox can be a really good way of looking at understanding how a particular piece of malware can operate. It also gives you the opportunity to have a click through as well of how the piece of software kind of operates using kind of a video. So if I was a braver man, and if I'm afraid I'm not, I would have done a live demo and kind of shown you a little bit about that. But essentially, there's a load of good resources out there, and one of my aims of this session is to point you towards some of them. Sorry. So this is again from Joe's Sandbox at the top there. This is some of the information that you can get from this resource. It gives you the view of basically what's going on, what it's doing, how it's interacting, how a piece of malware is interacting with your system, the evasion techniques that are deployed, and kind of the example here, Vidar, the information stealer, is a fairly kind of simplistic kind of piece of malware. Yes, it's quite new, but in terms of kind of how complex or the level of kind of technical kind of capabilities that are built into it, it's it's moderate. It's not necessarily the most advanced that we see. So yeah, please do take a look, have a poke around. Be curious is one of the key takeaways from this session. So yeah, we've got all of these different kind of attacks, and we've kind of articulated them in a fairly kind of modular manner. But essentially, the most successful attacks will leverage lots of different techniques that we've kind of covered. So yes, everything starts with reconnaissance, the OSINT kind of gathering, understanding what's out there, harvesting the credentials from previous breaches. Once you understand, your target, who you're going to go after, you can then start doing the phishing and trying to get access that way. Once you're in, get your malware deployed, backdoor, web shells, schedule tasks. Most threat actors will try and give themselves a number of different backdoors. So there's no point getting into somewhere and then kind of getting thrown out and not having a way back in. A number of my colleagues that are kind of ethical hackers will take that to the extreme and create multiple kind of backdoors to make sure that they can maintain persistence. The next bit, privilege escalation. You always want to be the king of the castle. You want to make sure that you have as much kind of rights and permissions as possible, one of those things you've got to do, I'm afraid. Lateral movements. Once you're in, you want to have a look around, you want to have a poke around, see what's going on, see where there are interesting bits within the environment. If there is a kind of information that you want to get out, then the exfiltration. There are different ways of doing that. Some of it could be very, very simple in terms of emails. Some of it could be using commercially available or free applications, whether it's kind of box or something like that, to get information out, or you could do something a little bit more kind of exciting. But yeah, get the information out, deploy the ransomware if that's kind of what you don't really want to do, and then off you go, really. So another free resource that I'm going to recommend, hopefully you guys have come across this, but MITRE the MITRE attack framework, MITRE. This is a really, really fantastic kind of resource. It's a taxonomy. It outlines, it outlines the different attacks and the different techniques that organizations or have suffered. And thank you, yep, MITRE, the different ways that an organization have or could be compromised. One of the things that's really, really important about MITRE is the inclusion in other areas. So yes, for understanding how threat actors behave, but then there are ways of mapping defensive capabilities and tooling to those attack, to the particular kind of behaviors and the techniques and the tactics. So all of a sudden you've got the offensive and the defensive, and you're kind of bringing it together. Most organizations will be operating with MITRE some way, shape or form. I would highly recommend getting familiar with it. You don't need to be an expert in all of these areas, but just a familiarity with it, being able to kind of articulate kind of use of MITRE to do that mapping, and the correlation is massively important. Cool. And hopefully you guys have come across MITRE. From a reconnaissance perspective, Shodan is a really good starting point. A lot of individuals will use this as as a kind of a jumping off point, really. There's one of my favorite things about Shodan is there's often a sale, so you get a lifetime sale for, I guess, about £1 or something. So you have access to all of the information that Shodan kind of provides. Shodan is essentially, as it's hopefully you can see there, it's a resource that is constantly scanning the web and kind of collating information about vulnerabilities. It's looking at what's out there, where it's located, and you can use it to conduct analysis of vulnerabilities at a national, international level. What I did here when I kind of just got this screenshot was just put in FortiGate. That then conducted the global search. You've got the kind of 500,000 results that shows you which countries are using that piece of technology. The vulnerabilities are associated kind of with it, and the organizations as well. So right in the middle there, you've got a list of organizations that are using that. A little bit more about the ports and stuff as well on the left-hand side. So these resources are kind of out there, and you can use them both for the offensive stuff, but then also on the kind of defensive side of things as well. Cool. Oh, and I would 100% say for Shodan, keep an eye out for the sale. Get that lifetime membership. Cool. Any idea what this is? I don't. Whilst this is kind of on the screen, this is one that I didn't make up. This is a genuine ransomware note. So diving into kind of ransomware. Why we talk about ransomware? Well, because it's very, very relevant. It's still relevant, prevalent, and it evolves, as we'll see. So this is something that a lot of organizations will be facing today, tomorrow, and continue to struggle with. But there's lots in this screenshot that you can kind of look at and learn about how kind of threat actors think and behave. So as I said, understanding how they think and operate allows you to better improve your defenses. So what can we tell and what can we see here? There's a degree of urgency. The whole thing about don't move or rename your files. They're trying to position themselves as in charge. The use of kind of caps in the text kind of to highlight certain words. We really can get your data back. Fantastic. It's all okay. They're the guys that are going to they're going to provide the support that you need. Yeah. So very, very kind of interesting kind of example of kind of analysis you could do at the human individual, I guess. Ransomware Live is a really good resource. This just shows you the ransomware attacks that have occurred since 2023. And yeah, I mean, if you look at on the left-hand side there, how we're tracking for Jan, we're largely in line with where we were for 2025. It's yeah, the trend is generally up. It's generally an upwards trend, kind of increasing year on year. Cool. So we go down into a little bit more detail. Why does it continue to be successful? The first thing is that it evolves. The ransomware attacks that we see today are not the ransomware attacks we saw when I was earlier on in my career, and that's both from a technical perspective, but then also from the tactics and the approach that the threat actors are using. So, single extortion, that was how it kind of started. You've got your yeah, just encrypt the files and demand the key. The next one, exfiltrate the data. So the double extortion, see that kind of frequently. The where Ransomware Live gets all their data from is basically looking at the breach sites and kind of collating the data that comes from the threat actors, kind of publishing information about their successes. And then you've got the triple extortion, where you're then having kind of DOS attacks and basically other ways of kind of turning the thumb screw would be a good way of thinking about that. Pressure is absolutely fundamental in this space. Cybersecurity doesn't operate in a vacuum, and I think there's we often forget that as professionals. So cybersecurity only happens really where there's a need for it. Business demands, organizational demands, whatever you think. Those businesses, those organizations will have an objective, a mission, a goal, stakeholders to keep happy, all of that kind of good stuff. Understanding how you can put pressure on individuals so they can't meet their objectives allows pressure to be built up and kind of improves your negotiating kind of position. So yeah, understanding that is something that the threat actors continue to do more and more. On the right hand side, as we said earlier on, the professionalism is increasing in this space really. So you don't necessarily need to be super duper techie to be part of or to launch a successful ransomware attack. You don't need to code it yourself. You can essentially buy it as a service, and depending on your own kind of capabilities, you can also buy support packages and that kind of thing. There's an interesting phenomenon as well for threat actors to specialize in particular areas or particular parts of that attack chain. So initial access brokers will get access to an organization and then sell it. So they specialize in that initial access. So yes, very kind of specialist in certain areas, but it's lowered the barrier to entry by having by providing kind of it as a service. It's worth bearing in mind as well that the service that you get from these guys tends to be quite good. Their reputation is everything. So making sure they're able to provide a good service, meet the SLAs that they have in place for providing support, yeah, is really important to them. So yeah, and then also at the bottom there, obviously all the crypto stuff and making sure that you can get your money out and clean it and put it into the economy in a way that you can then spend. There are ways of doing that as well. So yeah, all of these things are kind of complement or leading to the growth of kind of ransomware. A bit of a case study. Why? Because I think it's worth just taking a moment to think about how and what can happen. And there are a couple of these later on as well. So healthcare organization, and this information comes from the organization itself, as well as the filings that they had to make and the report that was released by the US kind of agency, the CISA. So what have we got? What's going to be useful here? Single set of stolen credentials on a Citrix remote access portal. Key bit, it lacked MFA. Dull. They moved laterally for 9 days before deploying ransomware across critical systems. Ouch. And then you've got the impact there of kind of systems going down, the ransom being paid, the costs, 2.5 billion, maybe a bit high, but yeah. What do we learn from it? And I think that's really important. So the no MFA, the dwell time. What you tend to focus on a lot as an organization is definitely dwell time. So how long have they been around for? Why weren't we able to detect this? So a lot of organizations will have detection capabilities, but won't necessarily be configured to the extent to which they should be. There's an element of buying something and then not maintaining it, and we see that again and again with regards to technology and capabilities within organizations. So yes, often dwell time is quite high because there's been a lack of monitoring and configuration. Single point of failure, they should really have known that something like this could have happened. And redundancy is something that we encourage every organization to think about. Resiliency is the name of the game. So yeah, redundancy and resiliency, organizations should be definitely kind of aware of this by now. Cool. So what I thought we'd do is have a look at some of, again, do a little bit of a technical deep dive into how kind of ransomware kind of operates. I am conscious of time. I've got one eye on the clock. We'll trot through this as much as we can. As you said earlier, in reference to the phishing side of things, ransomware is leveraging tooling and functions that that are used for genuine reasons. So take a moment. I would advise you guys to take a moment to understand how encryption works. It's one of the fundamental kind of components of kind of cybersecurity generally and kind of technology. So whether it's kind of symmetric or asymmetric encryption, why it's important to how it works, the importance of the different keys and all that kind of good stuff. Good question that's coming about protecting data from an AI chatbot. We'll talk about that later on. But thank you for your question. Once you're in, you tend to target particular files. You're deleting backups to make sure it's important, to make sure it's difficult to recover or impossible to recover. Terminating particular processes. And then you're looking to kind of go global, as it were. So deploying at scale. As you said, the CCM to push out ransomware binaries or using GPO to do that. It's something that we see again and again. The use of legitimate kind of resources and tooling to conduct these attacks, and everything happens on a Friday. That's the other thing. Friday afternoon. some of the stuff I'm absolutely fascinated by, the anti-analysis, it's almost you could be mistaken for considering that these pieces of malware have become kind of sentient. The ability for the way in which they've been developed and the way they've been developed to allow them to evade detection is fascinating in my opinion. So yeah, lots and lots of kind of evasion techniques that are kind of built into these pieces of malware. Command and control on the right hand side there, so the infrastructure and the exfiltration. Cobalt Strike, we mentioned this later on as well, but it's one of the tools that's out there that's used by a lot of kind of threat actors. It's also used by kind of ethical hackers and offensive teams within the industry generally to conduct testing. But as things have, as you saw, as things have professionalized, these kind of tools are now kind of more and more available, and you do get the odd kind of jailbroken kind of copy of Cobalt Strike knocking around. Cool. And then a little bit more about the exfiltration channels at the bottom there. Some of those you might be using at the moment, right? So there's your Blob, Mega, Dropbox, all of that kind of good stuff. But understanding this makes it easier for the forensics guys to then come in and start looking at this. So what does actually being ransomed look like? Well, I guess it starts with, a lot of the time we saw the ransomware as a service, so you could buy it, and on the left-hand side there, depends how much technical support you need. So for 1,200 kind of US, you could have a kind of fully set up, I guess, capability with the support on tap as needed. If you can't see the kind of context, is that on the left-hand side there is basically an advert for ransomware as a service. On the right-hand side there are some of the functions and some of the tooling that you get as part of that service. So the kind of the chat features that are built into these ransomware platforms that allow you to communicate with victims. The countdown clocks that are included, all of that good stuff is kind of built in and can be kind of purchased. You don't need to, as I said, you don't need to go off and do it yourself. One thing that's, again, worth considering is the negotiation that takes place. So everything in life is a negotiation. That's one thing that I would, it's not a key takeaway. Yeah, the negotiation on the right hand side there is the start of a negotiation with the threat actor group. They will understand your business. The threat actors, they will frequently have looked to understand the liquidity within the business, and that could be from all sources of funds. So it could be looking at your cyber insurance documents. It could be from just looking at your bank accounts and seeing kind of how much cash is potentially available to pay a threat actor group, someone like yourself, if you were doing that. Yeah, countdowns are really, really effective as a way of kind of increasing. As a way of increasing pressure. As you said earlier, it's all about mounting pressure and putting individuals in a place where they feel like they can't make a decision. So these chats can go on and on and on. This is, again, another little bit about the same chat. This is the kind of the toing and froing that takes place. So what have we got? Some of the good ones here. Yeah, you have, what is it? So far, it looks like your main objective is to F with us. That's, you can push these guys to a certain extent, but often they will snap. The price is not adequate. Give me a price I can pass on to the owner of the company. So the conversations that take place here are often they're business conversations. It's toing and froing from a amount is proposed, and then there's a counter offer, and there's kind of toing and froing, lots of kind of conversations about, is it too much, is it enough, how do we make sure that we trust you, all of that kind of good stuff. And then you get to the outcomes. One of the bits that I really liked is on the right hand side there. That was in relation to your competitors. Okay, so let's have a quick look at that. So one of your competitors was hit the same yesterday, if it helps your feelings. By the way, they offered more than you. So there is this real kind of manipulation of kind of individuals' kind of feelings and emotions within this negotiation process. With any kind of incident, we always recommend that negotiations are conducted by somebody outside of the organization. It's not something that you want to do internally, because the emotions are high, people are tired. You don't want to start offending these guys. You need a very, very business and transactional approach. But yeah, the outcome of that negotiation was $1 million in ransom. A little bit about the threat groups, I guess, from a ransomware perspective. These groups will change and evolve over time. They have a brand. So as we saw with the ransomware as a service, a lot of these organizations will have their own branding. Their reputation, as you said, is absolutely fundamental. They have their own kind of modus operandi, their own box of tricks that they will bring to the table. It's a cat and mouse game, constant disruption, but then they'll kind of spin up again, and you'll often see lots and lots of overlap in the individuals that are part of them. Here's a good one. Again, just looking at the professionalism. Conti, so this is an organization that was knocking around 2020 to 2023. What was interesting about this one was the internal operations of this gang were leaked. So there was a falling out within the organization itself, and the internal conversations were then released, and these are kind of available to have a look at. And there's everything from the incredibly mundane about the office, the HR department, the breakdown of the teams internally, what they do, the fact that salaries are paid twice a month, the working hours, and then there's a quote at the bottom there that is talking to is from a recruiter to a new hire, just stressing that you don't work at the weekends, and there's a good kind of working culture, a good attitude towards kind of annual leave. So kind of almost jumping back a little bit, but looking at the kind of lateral movement and then the persistence. So once you're in, you want to kind of spread and kind of get within the network as quickly, well, not as quickly as possible, but as far as possible, I'd say. There are different types of threat actors that could be accused of doing speed runs, i.e. kind of just doing everything as quickly as possible, not caring about how much noise they make. But there are others that will, as you said, the dwell time will be huge, and any kind of lateral movement will be very, 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 very kind of slow and steady. RDP kind of absolutely the one that is kind of worth looking at, kind of because we're seeing it more and more, is just living off the land and the use of the Windows admin tools. So PowerShell, you see it again and again and again, used by threat actors. It's something that is just increasing in prevalence. Persistence mechanisms, I'm not going to go through them too much, but basically yeah, running kind of scheduled tasks, all that kind of good stuff. Lots and lots of kind of activity in this space. And how would you do it? So here's some tools. We've spoken about a number of these earlier on. Kali is the one that most people will be familiar with. It's a Linux distro that you can kind of download and have a poke around. A lot of the tools come pre-installed. So tool, you become very, very familiar with the tools and what their capabilities are and kind of how they're used. So bottom left is Wireshark, so it captures captures kind of traffic, and you can use it for traffic analysis. Cobalt Strike at the top, that's the paid version, but you can see it's it's okay. It's not the most modern looking interface, but it's kind of taking it away from the command line interface and making it the GUI's all right, making it more accessible. On the right hand side there, that's the interaction with victims' desktops at the top. Sorry, that was the use of, or that's showing how you can kind of pivot. Metasploit at the top right, and we've got some fans of Linux on the right hand side there. Fab. Have a play is always my recommendation. Have a play on your own device and in your own kind of environment. Get the permission. Cloud stuff. Talk about that now if that's okay. I'm very conscious of time, but I think I've probably got too much left. So cloud stuff, misconfigs. You see these a lot. Publicly available S3. Obviously the lack of logging, identity type stuff. We've spoken about the MFAs and just kind of hammering and all that kind of good stuff. Supply chains. What's going to be useful here for you guys? Yeah, just the way that individuals will look to try and compromise a piece of software, the nature of the patience of these threat actors as well. So this one lasted from, was it 2021 to 2024, where you're starting to build up a reputation, kind of contribute to legitimate kind of efforts by other individuals, and then several years later you're looking at inserting backdoors. So really, really difficult to kind of stay on top. Yeah. Cloud is slightly different from an attack perspective, just by virtue of the technology that is there. We could trot through this fairly quickly, I think, if we have time. Apologies. Worth saying that this the terminology used on this particular slide is for AWS. It's like use of S3, that kind of thing. CloudTrail, it's all AWS kind of terminology, but can easily be replaced with most other terminology from the big kind of cloud providers. Again, top tip that I would kind of recommend for all individuals looking to kind of get into this field is spend a lot of time understanding kind of cloud terminology. You don't need to be an expert in all of them, but at least be able to identify the kind of key components and what's meant by S3, for example, all that kind of good stuff. We then go into a little bit more detail about each of these in terms of kind of what that looks like. So yeah, so you've got reference to info stealers again on the left-hand side there, stolen creds, you've got the MFA, great. Application exploitation, different ways you still need to patch this, you still need to patch your kind of environment. If there's an exposed management interface, you're going to have a bad time. And then you've got the stuff that's very, very specific in terms of the CI/CD pipeline compromise stuff. Yeah, any kind of misconfigurations in any of those kind of areas is a potential kind of source of absolute gold. Worth bearing in mind as well that when you're compromising or looking to compromise an organization, devs laptops tend to be some of the highest risk assets within an organization. The controls tend to be less rigorously enforced, so like local admin, all that kind of good stuff, but they also have access to, in theory, some of the most valuable assets within an organization, depending on the nature of the organization, of course, but yeah, dev stuff tend to be a real kind of really kind of focus for individuals. Once you're in, kind of mapping the environment, what does this actually mean? Well, it means, yeah, as it said, kind of understanding where you are, different ways of doing it. As you said, because of basically just by virtue of it being a cloud environment, slightly different, but the philosophy is still the same. You want to try and understand where everything is, basically stick your head up and try and work out where you want to go next. And I will trot through 15 minutes left, and that includes questions as well. Sorry. And then kind of escalating to admin, as we said, absolutely critical for threat actors to get to the point where they can have control of things. There's no point being there not being able to do anything. At the bottom there, you've got a number of different tools that are available for some of this stuff. So as you saw earlier, using genuine tools that are out there for kind of auditing or discovery, or I guess management of devices. You know, that whole living off the land piece is just becoming more and more important, because typically those kind of tools are permitted within the environment, so their use would kind of raise less concern. Prowler is the kind of a tool that's used for the AWS kind of security assessment at the bottom there. But yeah, could in theory be used by threat actors as well. Ping Castle is another one that's used within kind of AD for AD reviews. You see that being used by threat actors as well. So Ping Castle. Very, very kind of wordy slide, so apologies for that. I will not necessarily go into this in too much detail. Okay, one eye on the clock, but again, the philosophy is still the same. You are looking to move between services and accounts. You're looking to pivot, basically. If you're on a container, you want to escape. Yeah, and then making sure that you're surviving the credential kind of rotation as well, if credentials are rotated on a regular basis. And then, yeah, lots of things about kind of alerting. So remember, we had the MITRE attack framework. All of these can be mapped back to that, so you have visibility of, you have an understanding of what a threat actor does, and then you have that terminology and the lexicon that allows you to do that analysis. Fine. Okay. Cool. Very, very conscious that we've got Q&A session as well, so I will chop through the end. Sorry. AI for attackers, AI for defenders. Lots of stuff, but it's toing and froing. Good example of attackers using AI was the Claude piece. So there was a report that was released by Anthropic in 2025, outlining how threat actors were using their tool in a nefarious way. So despite the fact that there are guardrails in place, individuals are able to kind of manipulate it and get around it. This is from a source that's very, very good, Inisa. Again, recommend kind of taking some time to have a look at that. But essentially, the explosion of AI-supported phishing campaigns, we've already seen kind of in excess of 80% of those currently conducted in the world are using kind of AI. And then you've got the flip side. So this is just a screenshot from Joe's sandbox. So the diagrams that we saw earlier of the info stealer. But yeah, essentially the use of AI for defenders is growing, and the analysis can become quicker. It's more in depth. It's enriched. All that kind of good stuff. Yeah, defense massively simplified. Things that you should do: defender depth, zero trust, absolutely kind of critical. Patch, detect and respond. Be able to recover, and then just at the top right hand side there, just make sure it's secure by design. So the whole kind of threat modeling, making sure there are an understanding of how threat actors could attack a particular application or system, front load that right at the beginning, and all of a sudden you have much more visibility, and you're able to to kind of push ahead with it. Career stuff, have a look at the frameworks that already exist. 3 questions that I always ask. Building a career, so if you want to build a career, the what, always ask, what does this mean? What does this mean for me? What does this mean for you? And then now, what should we be doing about it? It's more than cyber, more than a technical field. You'll never know everything, and that's okay. One tip that I always give to individuals is don't allow yourself to be truly comfortable. If you're comfortable, if you're really, really, really comfortable, you're not necessarily pushing yourself, and you're not necessarily learning. And I think you should always be kind of learning on the edge of where you are, where your knowledge is, and looking to kind of expand. Work with the business is another thing. Cybersecurity doesn't happen in isolation. There's always a reason for it. There's always a business case for it, and then throw yourself into it. There's a lot to kind of cover, a lot to kind of do. So yeah, read. Okay, thank you. I am conscious that we've got a Q&A, so I will kind of open it up to that, if that's okay. Thank you.
What a truly insightful session that was. Thank you, sir, so much for taking us deep into the world of modern cyber attack, helping us think like true defenders by understanding the attacker's minds.
Thank you once again for joining us, sir. We learned a great deal about real attack chains and how thinking like an attacker can significantly strengthen cyber defense strategies.
No, thank you ever so much for having me.
We have a Q&A session right now.
Cool. Thank you.
And viewers can ask questions.
Cool. So I can see there's a couple of questions here. If I go through them from, there was a question earlier about how do you protect data from AI chatbots. That's really good. I mean, we could unpick that and kind of go into that in a couple of hours. But essentially, it depends really. So if you're not paying for the product, you are the product is generally the rule of thumb when it comes to kind of technology. So one of the first things that you could try and do is just avoid the use of kind of AI generally, or get a paid subscription where there's a better level of kind of comfort and visibility of how your data is kind of being managed. If you're talking about kind of other areas of other uses of AI chatbots, whether it's kind of the phishing side of things, it's just being more aware, being conscious that these types of technologies exist, that the bar for the bar for executing attacks has been lowered massively by AI, and that how the attacks are performed in terms of the quality of the attacks has risen. So we're in this really difficult place where it's more difficult to spot them, but they're more easy to conduct. There's a question here about CEH or Security Plus. They are, neither one is better than the other one. CEH obviously for kind of the pen testing stuff, and Security Plus is a more kind of holistic approach. What else we got? Oh, there's multiple questions. How does a typical modern cyber attack lifecycle look from initial access to full system compromise? So it depends. Okay, it depends. But essentially, what you've got, the threat actors will go through the steps that we kind of looked at. So often it will start with some kind of phishing attack. Let's say it starts with the kind of discovery piece. There'll always be an element of searching to see what's already out there. We'll start with the reconnaissance. You'll then start to kind of do the initial kind of access piece with typically kind of a phishing attack. From a threat actor's perspective, it depends what they want to do is the other piece. Whether they want to commit super sneaky payment fraud, or they want to just go in and deploy ransomware and and run away. Different threat actors are motivated by different reasons, and they will use different tools and techniques and tactics to actually achieve their objectives. So understanding what they are motivated by then gives you the understanding as to what techniques they use, and then kind of off they go. Okay. What defensive strategy is more effective today? Prevention, focus, security, or detection and response? Oh, that's a really good question. I guess prevention, focus, security, or detection and response focused. So a defensive. So I guess what I wouldn't necessarily do is I wouldn't say you need one or the other. That's the first thing. You wouldn't necessarily say that I'm going to be focus on prevention or the detection and response. You just have both. You make it as difficult as possible to get in, and then you have all the detection capabilities kind of in place as well. The bit that we've seen change in recent years is the focus on resilience, because of the nature of cyber attacks and the ransomware kind of epidemic, and the ability of threat actors to knock an organization out, making sure that you have the ability to recover within an agreed time frame. So it's not just about completely kind of preventing an attack, it's about being able to recover from it. So the focus kind of really has kind of flipped over, and you see that reflected in regulation as well, which is another kind of is something else that's worth looking at. We haven't really spoken about today. What is most exploited? Phishing, phishing. Then probably kind of cloud misconfigs. What are some common mistakes organizations make that unintentionally make attacks easier? Oh, that's a good question. Probably introducing technology in a way that's unmanaged. So you hear about shadow technology. This is where there is technology within the business that the typical tech teams don't have visibility over. So everything now has technology in it. Everything now is connected to the internet. If you've got a SaaS platform, anybody can go and sign up to that. So typically you see a lot of that taking place without the controls and the framework and following the framework that's in place. What else have we got? Comments, we've done that one. Attackers moving laterally with a network. That's a massive topic in itself. Drop me an email and I can ping over some resources for that about kind of moving laterally. Recent OWASP top 10 shows there's more cyber threats because developers does this because AI is being used. Okay, so AI is being used a lot by developers, so the whole vibe coding space. What that means is that individuals that weren't previously developing are now developing, but doing so at a level that isn't necessarily allowing them, well, they don't necessarily have the understanding to validate and check that what they're developing is correct. So you've got two things really. You've got individuals that are developing that previously weren't, and then you've also got individuals that are doing more and more development than previously, or just shortcutting it really. So there are two bits there. I think that's all of the questions that have come in, and we're just slightly over time. Oh, you're currently muted. Oh.
Powerful insights into modern cyber attack and the mindset behind today's speeches.
Thank you once again, sir, for joining.
Oh, we can't hear you. Oh, we can't hear you, sorry. It might just be me.
Charging khatam hai. Lastly, I would like to thank all of you for being such an attentive and enthusiastic.
Oh. Cool. We got some technical problems with the sound, but yeah, massive thank you to everybody, and I think thank you for the questions. Thank you for inviting me along. Good luck with the rest of your event. Everybody, please get involved in anything like this at university and beyond. Use your network. That's the other thing. Last thing, use your network. Speak to individuals that already know. People first. Get to know individuals within this space. Ask questions. Nobody minds if you ask questions. Yeah, that's it. That's it from me. Thank you ever so much.